Good Sunday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for October the 1st. Today, we are reading together in 2 Kings chapter 16, which is going to detail for us the very, very unfortunate reign of King Ahaz. If you're going to put a ranking system of the various kings of Israel, well, they probably all be in like the F tier because they're all pretty bad. Whenever we think about the kings of Judah, however, we've had some pretty good kings. Ahaz, not one of them. He's pretty terrible. We'll read all about that today. So let me go and get the text up on the screen for us. We'll read along together here in 2 Kings chapter 16, which tells us that this is during the 17th year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, that Ahaz, son of Jotham, became king of Judah. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. He did not do what was right in the sight of Yahweh his God like his ancestor David, but walked in the ways, and here's your detail, all you need to know, he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. He even sacrificed his son in the fire, imitating the detestable practices of the nations Yahweh had dispossessed before the Israelites. He sacrificed and burned incense on the high places, on the hills, and under every green tree. When Aram's king Rezin and Israel's king Pekah, son of Remaliah, came to wage war against Jerusalem, they besieged Ahaz, but were not able to conquer him. At that time, Aram's king Rezin recovered Elath for Aram and expelled the Judahites from Elath. Then the Arameans came to Elath, and they are still there today. So Ahaz sent messengers to King Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria, saying, I am your servant and your son. March up and save me from the grasp of the king of Aram and the king of Israel, who are rising up against me. Ahaz also took the silver and gold found in Yahweh's temple and in the treasuries of the king's palace and sent them to the king of Assyria as a bribe. So the king of Assyria listened to him and marched up to Damascus and captured it. He deported his people to Kir but put Rezin to death. King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet King Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria. When he saw the altar that was in Damascus, King Ahaz sent a model of the altar and complete plans for its construction to the priest Uriah. Uriah built the altar according to all the instructions King Ahaz sent from Damascus. Therefore, by the time King Ahaz came back from Damascus, the priest Uriah had completed it. When the king came back from Damascus, he saw the altar. Then he approached the altar and ascended it. He offered his burnt offering and his grain offering, poured out his drink offering, and splattered the blood of his fellowship offerings on the altar. He took the bronze altar from before Yahweh in front of the temple between his altar and Yahweh's temple and put it on the north side of his altar. Then King Ahaz commanded the priest Uriah, offer on the great altar the morning burnt offering, the evening grain offering, and the king's burnt offering and his grain offering. Also offer the burnt offering of all the people of the lands, their grain offering, their drink offerings, splatter on the altar all the blood of the burnt offering and all the blood of the sacrifice. And the bronze altar will be for me to seek guidance. The priest Uriah did everything King Ahaz commanded. Then King Ahaz cut off the frames of the water carts and removed the bronze basin from each of them. He took the basin from the bronze oxen that were under it and put it on the stone pavements to satisfy the king of Assyria. He removed Yahweh's temple, Yahweh's temple, the Sabbath from Yahweh's temple, the canopy, the Sabbath canopy, there we go, they had built in the palace, and he closed the outer entrance for the king. The rest of the events of Ahaz's reign, along with his accomplishments, are written in the historical record of Judah's kings. Ahaz rested with his ancestors and was buried with his ancestors in the city of David, and his son Hezekiah became king in his place. And that is 2 Kings chapter 16. Again, we have a decent run of good kings going back to King Azariah / Uzziah. Then his son Jotham was a decently good king as well. He was noted as doing what was right in his sight. And yet here is one of those times whenever the son does not follow the father. And certainly Ahaz did not follow the ways of his father, being truly the worst king of Judah, in the fact that it is stated explicitly he did not do what was right in the sight of Yahweh his God, like his ancestor David. And to really give you a more accurate description of what that looked like, it looked like him leading as an Israelite king, as a well, they're all Israelites, as a northern tribes of Israel king would lead. What does that involve? Well, it involves, unfortunately, the worst type of paganism that could be imagined, where they worshipped Molech. And in doing so, he offered his son on the fire, meaning he offered his son as a human sacrifice to the god. Well, probably be better to call him a demon, which the supernatural being, understand the words there, but really to the demon Molech. This specific practice is actually discussed in Leviticus chapter 20, and God absolutely, in very certain terms, says that anyone who does such thing will be condemned. And again, you want to know what God thinks about Molech worship, go read Leviticus chapter 20. So he did a ton of things that were just absolutely despicable. He sacrificed and burns incense on high places, on the hills, and under every green tree. Whatever sort of paganism he can get involved in, he got involved in it. So it shouldn't surprise us then that his kingdom during his reign is going to suffer for that. We see that Aram's king Rezin and Israel's king Pekah end up coming to war against the southern tribes of Judah. They besiege Jerusalem. They they don't totally conquer him, but they certainly inflict a very strong damage against him. Just reading from the notes of my Bible, both Aram and Israel invaded and devastated Judah. And we'll read about this more in 2 Chronicles, and then put Jerusalem under siege. And here's the goal. The goal was for them to force Ahaz into an anti-Assyrian coalition, because Assyria at this time is gaining steam and becoming the great force in the area. So they're wanting Aram, so Syria / Aram, same place, and Israel, they are wanting Judah to join forces so that they can try to repel Assyria from this particular region. But they do not, Ahaz does not want to do that. So they're thinking, okay, we'll either force him to, or we'll kill him and put somebody in place who will do that. Well, what Ahaz ends up doing is he ends up just submitting himself to the enemy, the enemy of his enemy. He sees as his friend. So he ends up submitting to Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria. He goes to him for help and says, hey, they're coming against me. Please help me. Help me to gain control of my land, and I will basically be subservient to you. Of course, the main failure here is that he had no reason to go to the pagan. He simply needed to go to God. Yet he didn't. Why? Because he was a horrible pagan worshiper. He was an idolater. There's also some other background information that we can read about here, or that we can tie in here, that we won't go into extreme detail. But Isaiah, what's said in Isaiah chapter 7, I believe, ties in here, that he actually had the opportunity to be delivered by God, but forsook it. We also read in Amos chapter 9, there's some text that ties into this text as well. It seems that Amos prophesied a few decades before Ahaz, but told everything that was going to take place. So it's just unfortunate here that whenever the king of Judah, which normally has been a good king, when that takes place, when that king does not follow Yahweh as his fathers had done, things turn sour really fast. And here he is again, just completely giving himself over to the pagan king Tiglath-Pileser, saying, I will serve you if you will deliver me, when very simply he should have said that to Yahweh. Please, I will serve you, and I will be trust in you. I'll trust in your power. I know that you can deliver me. But he doesn't say that to Yahweh. He says this to this pagan king. And at this point, he just basically bends the knee and starts kissing the ring of Tiglath-Pileser. Whenever they're in Damascus, it says that the way I read it, Tiglath-Pileser saw the altar that was in Damascus, and it seems that King Ahaz takes notice of this and says, hey, let's build him one of those with us. That way he can feel comfortable and he can see that I am totally subservient to him. So he gives these plans to the priest Uriah, who, again, here's the priest not being what they ought to be, which whenever you have the priest not being what he ought to be, whenever you have the king not being what he ought to be, well, that's just a recipe for disaster within the land. So they get to working on this altar. They end up constructing this altar. Ahaz offers sacrifices on it. He tells Uriah to offer sacrifices on it. He turns his attention totally to everything going on with this altar and just basically forsakes everything to do with Yahweh. In fact, what we see at the end of verse number 15 is he says that the bronze altar will be for me to seek guidance, not Yahweh. No, not Yahweh. This is where I will seek guidance. Initially, from the start, he should have sought guidance with Yahweh, and Yahweh would have directed him away from this type of paganistic worship, but he didn't do that. And because he didn't do that, he's going to suffer greatly in the fact that he leads Judah to a terrible in a terrible condition, and makes things just awful for those who are going to come after him. Now, thankfully, we're going to see that Hezekiah is going to become a king in his place, and he's going to help to right the wrongs of a lot of what takes place in Judah beginning in chapter 18. But still, everything here just spits in the face of Yahweh. He did everything. Verse 18, I think, is key here. Verse 18 is key. He did everything not to satisfy Yahweh, but he did everything to satisfy the king of Assyria, even removing things again from Yahweh's temple and altering things within Yahweh's temple. His concern wasn't for Yahweh. It wasn't for the one who had put the nation where they were. It wasn't for the one who had dispossessed the nations that used to live here and gave it to Israel. No, it's not for Yahweh. It's for Tiglath-Pileser. And how sad to see a king of Judah who had so many good examples before him just completely ignore them and seek the favor of men instead of seeking the favor of Yahweh. And that certainly is something that we can learn a lot from. Who do we seek this favor of? Who do we seek to satisfy? Do we seek to satisfy men, or do we seek to satisfy God and him alone? Hopefully the lessons that we learn here from King Ahaz will stick with us and be there as a reminder to us when we're tempted to satisfy men instead of God. If you have any questions or comments about this text, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. And tomorrow we'll be reading together in chapter 17 of 2 Kings chapter 17. We'll be gathering here in just a little bit at 10 o'clock for our Bible study. Hope that we'll get to see everybody then, and then we'll be gathering for worship at 11 a.m. and we'll be doing our next theme study for this year, and that has been in who we are in Christ. And this month we're going to focus on how we are the bride of Christ, and looking at the teaching from Ephesians chapter 5, doing some study into that, and then taking away some lessons that we need to be reminded of concerning what it means for us to be the bride of Christ. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a great rest of your Sunday. Take care. God bless.